This is Season 1, Episode 8 of Twins Discuss. I'm Raquel, a research scientist.
And I'm Raven, a medical professional.
Today, the twins discuss
CIA Project MK Ultra.
Listener discretion is advised. This podcast contains mentions of cruelty, human experimentation, death, and drug and alcohol use that may not be suitable for some. This podcast was written using information from various sources. It is presented as accurately as possible, though some of what is mentioned is simply speculation. Sources can be found on our social media pages at Twins Discuss Podcast.
So I wrote this podcast because it's something that doesn't have to do with shipwrecks, but
Whatever.
Yeah, we were going to make a podcast pretty much on, well, mainly shipwrecks, because most people are, but then we're like, we need to mix in some other stuff, so we've done face transplants and death, and we've only had 2 shipwrecks now. Yeah,
El Faro and Semfjord.
Yep. Which
but there are many more on the horizon.
Yep, we were talking about how that's going to pick up. So, but yeah, MK Ultra.
Well, we do have a very list of interests, so.
Yeah, we do have a very wide list of interests.
I think most people do, or they should.
They should. But, honestly, we're doing topics that interest us.
Oh, yeah, it's our podcast. Thank y'all for listening.
Yeah, these are actually things that we look up anyway and talk about anyway, so we figure we'd just let y'all involved. But, yeah, MK Ultra, whenever we started talking about this podcast, it was one of the things that popped in my head almost immediately. I don't know if you know anything about it.
So I do listen to Supernatural by Ashley Flowers, which is another podcast, and she did a show on MK Ultra, but it's always different to hear it from somebody else's perspective that kind of thinks in the same way that you do, because hers, while it's I love that podcast, don't get me wrong, sometimes it can be a bit more about the storytelling and less about the facts of what it is, and you and I are much more, fact-based.
Yeah, when I've listened to, because Unsolved Murders on Parcast does one, did a series on CIA ones, and MK Ultra's like the number one conspiracy that people think about when they think about conspiracies with the CIA is MK Ultra, because, well, it's true. So everything I'm going to tell you in here is true.
Ooh, exciting. Delicious.
Yeah, there's some speculation, but there's this one case that we're going to talk about, and it's interesting. The whole thing is true, though.
I can't wait to hear it.
All right, here we go. MK Ultra was a code name given to a project that experimented on humans, which was sanctioned and undertaken by the CIA. MK Ultra is a cryptonym, which is a combination of the digraph MK, indicating the sponsorship of the technical services staff, and Ultra, which is a formally designated secret classification for World War II era intelligence.
Oh.
So a digraph is a combination of 2 letters that represents one sound, but I don't know where they got the MK from. I just know that it is, it means that it involved the sponsorship of the technical services staff of the CIA. And there's a lot there. And then Ultra was... Yeah, and then Ultra was like the secret... I know, right? Okay. And then Ultra was the highest classification in World War II for the CIA.
Okay.
These human experiments were intended to develop procedures and identify drugs, like LSD, to be used in interrogations. They hoped these drugs would weaken someone and force confessions through brainwashing or psychological torture.
Ugly.
All that stuff you see on TV and in movies about the CIA doing... I was researching this going, they actually did this stuff.
Of course they did it. Everything that you see in the world or hear in the world is stemmed in reality and truth someplace.
I just can't believe someone would do this to people.
Oh, I can.
Yeah.
People don't surprise me anymore, not even a little bit.
They still surprise me.
I'm sorry.
It was organized through the Office of Scientific Intelligence in the CIA, coordinated with the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Laboratories, and had 2 other code names, Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke.
Oh my God, I love that. That's what I would name my code stuff. Something ridiculous like artichoke. I love that. Also, kind of the way it rolls off your tongue sounds really serious. I'm working on, artichoke today. Are you now? It's all serious. Artichoke. All right, carry on.
Like I was talking to Raquel earlier, I really wish I could record bloopers. Y'all should see some of the stuff we say and come up with. All right. The operation was accepted in 1953, but the scope was reduced in 1964 and officially halted in 1974. So this was active for 21 years.
You can get a lot done in that time with government funding.
Yep.
If you get the funding.
They got the funding, and
then, wow.
It was it cost around $10 million back then, which approximately is $87.5 million today.
Just to appropriately learn to torture people?
6% of the CIA's operating budget went into MK Ultra in 1953.
Wow.
Yep. And it included covertly administering increasing doses of psychoactive drugs such as LSD, electroshocks, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, as well as many other forms of torture. Now, if y'all don't know what sensory deprivation is, actually look this up, because it sounds like something you'd understand, but actually there's these things called sensory deprivation chambers. They actually just opened one up about 30 minutes away from where I live. And there are these tanks that you put people in that are half full of water, and they float in them. And it messes up their ability to hear and see and think and know where they're at. And they close the tanks on them.
Yes, they close the tank. And the water temperature is exactly body temperature, so you can't feel it on you.
Yep. I can't imagine how freaky that is.
They do them for therapy, for people that have sensory issues.
Yep.
But it's a very controlled environment, and at any point you can choose to leave it. So it's a safety thing.
I know of sensory deprivation when it comes to light and sound in rooms, because I've done some stuff like that in therapy. But I'm so incredibly claustrophobic that I couldn't maintain it.
I couldn't. I've thought about it because of my migraine issues, and it's been suggested, but there's no way that I could tolerate it. I don't even like wearing my earphones right now, like we talked about earlier.
Yep. So the MK Ultra was conducted on over 150 U.S. and Canadian subjects that they've admitted to. Some voluntary, some not, most not. Activities were carried out under the guise of research in 80-plus institutions, including colleges and universities, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies.
Not surprised at all by that. I know that the government will give money to colleges to conduct their research for them. And it's cheaper that way than doing it, in-house. So I could see them being like, hey, you over here at, let's say, Purdue, you want to do this study for us, we'll pay you for it.
Yeah,
they've got the expertise.
And college students are broke, so they'll do a lot.
And they're willing to get ahead.
And of course, the CIA did admit that they were doing this. They operate under front organizations.
Of course.
And when they did the trial, they said they swore that this was a continuation of World War II experiments that were worked on and researched by Japanese facilities and Nazi concentration camps. So they were continuing this research from the Axis powers. They were doing it on Allied civilians.
Oh, that's a circle, man.
Yeah. So all this was to learn to subdue people and control minds. MK Ultra's use of mescaline, which is peyote, on unwitting subjects was started by the Nazis. It was theorized that the Nazis still used the CIA to acquire further information on mind control techniques. Did I say that right? It was theorized the Nazis, were still used by the CIA. The Nazis were still used by the CIA.
Oh, no doubt.
I'm not editing that out. So, I mean, the head of the CIA was, for MK Ultra, was named Sidney Gottlieb.
I'm not making any assumptions here, but you can all...
Yeah?
Yeah.
Who was a chemist and poison expert under the orders of CIA Director Allen Dulles in 1953. So the aim at the time was to develop drugs for use against the Soviet bloc. This was in response to alleged Soviet, Chinese, and North Korean use of mind control techniques on U.S. prisoners during the Korean War. Project attempted to produce a truth serum to interrogate suspected Soviet spies. Y'all, I gotta have a moment, because this sounds so unreal. The stuff that we do now, reading this is like, are you serious? Y'all actually thought this sci-fi bullshit was possible?
But on the other side of it, I'm sitting here going, yep, this makes perfect sense to me. Like, that they would do this. I mean, if you look at our political culture now, what people believe in or don't believe in, why in the hell in 1954 wouldn't you say, okay, the Nazis used to be our enemy now, but now the Soviets are our enemy. They matter more for us to figure out how to defeat because of whatever the political reason is at the time. Let's learn to take these, learnings and teachings from our former mortal enemies and use them as best we can, as ridiculous as it sounds, because ridiculous things push science forward.
And, MK Ultra, it was such a massive, silent undertaking.
Right.
And I look at it like, okay, brainwave analysis, stuff like that. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense. But the use of LSD, MDMA, which, if y'all don't know, is the main component in Molly and ecstasy, mescaline, heroin, barbiturates, meth, and what's the other one? Psilocybin. Just seems you can't control those things.
But they didn't know this back then.
No.
I mean, these are the same people that were spraying and fogging DDT onto children.
We're doing a podcast on that too.
Yeah, that's coming up. These are the same. We didn't understand how the mind. We still don't understand how the mind works. But I mean, you're never going to learn it unless you start experimenting.
We learned a lot about hallucinogenic drugs through MK Ultra, but the sad thing is that they destroyed the majority of the documentation prior to the trial, which is something that I'll talk about too. So, eventually, though, LSD was deemed unpredictable for counterintelligence. I know.
But you got to do the experiment to find out.
Yep. Under MK Ultra, there was something called Operation Midnight Climax. And there's a reason I chose this one to talk about versus some of the others, because it employed government-paid prostitutes to lure unsuspecting men to CIA, quote, safe houses, end quote. These men were then drugged and experimented on. The CIA would watch through two-way glasses and record the effects using devices disguised in electrical outlets. Okay, this project had very little CIA oversight.
I bet.
Many testified, those who were involved said it was a, quote, party-like atmosphere, end quote. And some of the agents were said to watch the scenes unfold while drinking cocktails.
It's like a scene from Mad Men.
It's childish, but, I mean, you've got millions of dollars that, and you get to watch people get high and, so, I mean.
I have a question.
I hope I have an answer.
You probably will. I'm not saying that women aren't crazy, but aside from the prostitutes, how many women were involved in the higher echelon of, or in any part of the research for MK Ultra?
I would say very few.
Yeah.
Judging by way this case presented itself, I would say there were very few women involved, and those who were involved were probably the wives or girlfriends or whatnot of CIA agents and people who were tested on and whatnot. Because the CIA would actually dose unsuspecting people, including their own. So one of those cases was Frank Olson. Have you heard of Frank Olson?
I have heard of Frank Olson, but I don't remember a ton about. I've got a concussion still, so I don't remember much of anything.
Yeah, he was a scientist for the CIA. During a retreat in 1953, his drink was spiked with LSD.
Yes, that's him.
A few days later, on November 18th, he jumped from the window of a New York City hotel. His death was ruled a suicide. However, in a second autopsy performed in 1994, they found injuries sustained prior to the fall, which indicated possible assassination. What did Frank know? The CIA settled with the family for a little under $1 million, and then the CIA offered an official apology. So they all but admitted that they murdered this man in 1953 by spiking his drink, and then possibly, I don't know if they admitted just spiking his drink or if they admitted to the possible assassination and spiking his drink, but it was hinky.
It sounds hinky. I know there's more out there on him. I'd have to look into it, but the fact that the CIA would, kill somebody back then, I don't know about now so much, but back then for, knowing something or whatever, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it was, when I read it, I'm like, this is tragic. I mean,
predictable and terrible.
Yeah, I think it was, I can't remember how many floors it was. I think it was either 13 or 14 floors of a hotel he jumped out of in New York City. Yeah. So I mentioned that a lot of different people volunteered for the MK Ultra project. Some of the famous ones was Robert Hunter, the Grateful Dead guitarist.
Of course.
Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber.
Oh, yeah, not surprised.
Whitey Bulger, the mobster.
Really?
And Ken Kesey, the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, wow. I mean, if it were a highly controlled, safe sort of environment, I could understand some people wanting to give it an opportunity, to be a part of it, because every mind is different. What can my mind offer you that may help, this government?
And like Ken Kesey, for instance, he later wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest after he had the LSD experience.
Oh, now that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, so he reported, so he was in college at Stanford University, and he reported the CIA would host parties called, quote, acid tests, end quote, which they would use music and drugs combined with the experience of fluorescent paint and black lights.
What?
And warp the mind. So yeah, I mean, and all of those people I just listed have contributed, have said that the MK Ultra experience is what actually helped mold them and morph them into what they became and what they did.
That's scary for the Unabomber.
Yeah, I mean, drugs have, from personal experience, they definitely have a significant psychological impact on who you become.
I know that after I have surgeries and I get a Percocet, I'm not capable of thinking clearly, so I can't imagine what it would be like to not be able to think clearly and be in a position of power or have the intent or ability to harm people at your core.
Oh, yeah, and they, a lot of people who take acid, say that they get hyper-focused, just like with meth. They get hyper-focused. They see, they see colors and sound. They see these beautiful images and they paint them out, or they draw them out. Or I'd imagine it'd be kind of hard to write, but I guess some people, the brain acts different for everybody. So
you can maybe write it, but can you understand it when you go back to read it? I know that when I had my hysterectomy and I went back to work like 3 weeks later and I was typing up stuff, I'd go back and read it the next day and be like, and I'd be like on a Percocet for the pain. I'd be like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but Ernest Hemingway quoted, you're supposed to write drunk and edit sober.
Well, and I agree with that in a lot of ways, that some of the best writing that I ever did, I was exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd spent the day working or whatever, then I'd go and I'd write, and I'd just have a flurry of it, and then I'd go back and read it like, gonna fix that. But damn, I never would have thought about that if I hadn't have been, blind with exhaustion.
Yeah, I can speak from personal experience, being a recovering alcoholic, that I never wrote anything worth a damn when I was drunk.
No, you didn't. I have all the text messages that were garbage.
Yeah, you can get rid of those.
I have. I mean, I don't keep any. I mean, you've been sober for so long now to me that there's no intention of you ever not being sober anymore, so I don't need to keep those reminders to throw in your face when you're stupid.
Yeah, no, because I know I'm being stupid then.
Yeah, well, if you're stupid now, I mean, I'm like, you're being stupid. You're like, yes, I am.
Yes, I am. I totally know it.
But it's not with alcohol.
Yeah, it's not really with much of anything except,
Oh, I mean emotional stupidity.
Chinese food. And pizza. It's just being food stupid. So
make good decisions, Raven.
The CIA experimented on mental patients, prisoners, drug users, and sex workers, as well, I'm sure many others. They picked people they deemed, quote, who could not fight back.
I hate that.
Yep, they administered to willing and unwitting CIA employees, military personnel, doctors, agents, and the general public.
Do you think they did anything with, like, the insane asylums and orphanages?
Oh, to be sure. Absolutely.
The people that nobody would notice.
Unwitting, unable to fight back. Yeah, absolutely. And cheap. So, in 1964, so we're 53 to 64, MK Ultra was renamed MK Search, and continued.
That's not nearly as cool.
I know. Well, it was divided into two projects. So it continued the goals of the first project, but it was divided into two mini projects: MK Often and MK Chitwick.
Gosh, I love this.
I mean, they're just sitting around drinking scotches, going, "Yeah, let's name this one MK Often and this one MK Chickwit." I don't know. I looked it up trying to figure out why they named it that, and I couldn't find anything on it.
At this point, does any of it really flow in such a way?
I mean, you got a really cool one. You got Bluebird, then you got Artichoke, and then you've got Often, and then you have Chickwit. I mean,
it is.
Sure, yeah. So funding commenced in 1965 after they split the projects up, and ended in 1971. The main objective became a joint project to find new offensive uses of agents, specifically ones that would be incapacitating.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense to me.
Yep. So now they moved away from, like, the mind control BS, and now they're just like, we just want to F them up. And, I mean, so its purpose was to develop, test, and use biological, chemical, and radioactive material to elicit unpredictable human behaviors and psychological changes. So again, they just want to F them up. As of March of 1971, over 26,000 potential agents were acquired for screening.
Wow.
Yep. So
that's a big number.
MK Often was to deal with the testing. It was to study the toxicological how it transmitted and behavior effects of those drugs in animals and in humans.
Oh.
MK Chickwit was concerned in acquiring the information on the new drug development in Asia and Europe, and then acquiring those samples.
Okay, I understand now why it's separated into two.
Yeah, the project focused mainly on something called LSD-25. The CIA wanted to know if they could make Soviet spies defect against their will, and whether Soviets could do the same to us.
At least they're looking at it, because I was just thinking, well, if Soviets can use it, then obviously they can use it against us. And then really, since the universe must have balance, everything levels out.
Y'all who know Star Wars must understand that. So LSD-25, I didn't put a whole lot in the script about it, but LSD-25 is pretty much the main branch now of LSD.
Okay.
So it really didn't go anywhere except out into the public world.
Oh, okay.
And they seem to really be harping and stuck on LSD. Probably because it was they could make it and it was easy to alter because it was man-made.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it wasn't like the way crocodile is now, whatnot, where it's red iodine and battery acid that you inject. I mean, it's a little bit more sensitive.
Well, and there are aspects of LSD that I could believe would be highly desirable to their end goals if they could figure out how to get rid of the undesirable effects.
I heavily believe in microdosing drugs for certain mental conditions and pain relief. I fully believe in it, and I will, on the fucking record, I believe in microdosing for psilocybin, for LSD, especially for people who have bipolar schizophrenia, and for marijuana. Absolutely.
I agree with you. If there is any opportunity, especially in a controlled environment, if there's any opportunity to help people, they should be given every opportunity to be helped.
The world itself needs to, get
past
its
their
head,
stigmas.
Yeah, its head out of its ass, get past these stigmas, and realize there are certain things that the reason addiction in general, the reason that addiction occurs the way that it does is because people overdose, not overdose, but
Space dose
on things, because they're not shown or helped. They're trying to elicit this certain effect, and they're not able to, they're looking for that, and they're chasing this effect. They're going up and up and up and up, up and up, until they overdose. One word.
Yeah. And they require a specific guidance from people that understand the pharmacology and how it works physiologically.
Yep, and there was this wonderful study about microdosing LSD for people with schizophrenia and how it leveled them out and they were able to be normal.
Good. It's better than doping them up so much they don't know who they are, where they're from, and they can't function in society and live their lives because they're on so much whatever they happen to be on, because there's so many different medications out there. Did any of that research come from MK Ultra at all?
I'm sure. I'm sure that a lot of, you know how when new presidents get into office, they need to piss on the fire hydrant and they need to undo everything the other president did they disagree with? Mm-hmm. Well, it actually was good to come to fruition when Ford got into office with MK Ultra, because in 1975, the Church Committee of the United States Congress and Gerald Ford's U.S. President's Commission began to investigate the activities of MK Ultra, and the U.S. President's Commission within the U.S. was known as the Rockefeller Commission. Mm-hmm. So you have the Church Committee and you have the Rockefeller Commission. Mm-hmm. And basically Ford was like, WTF, what is all that, what are y'all doing? So in 1973, CIA Director Robert Helms ordered the destruction of all MK Ultra files. So in 75, the commission was developed, but prior to that in 73, he was like, remember it ended in 71.
Yeah.
We're destroying everything.
Because all of it was a negative blemish on the United States government as a whole.
A huge waste of money, a huge waste of time. Even though, honestly, just a lot of, I want to say good came from it. Even though you had to shuffle through a lot of bad to get there. So,
unethical research can lead to significant useful breakthroughs. But I'm not saying that you need to have, a lack of ethics when you do research, because that's not how we perform things as, humans. But I could see where those records, even though they're a blight on the CIA and the United States government, could be looked through and handed over in pieces that could be beneficial to pharmaceutical, research agencies.
Yeah, and this is why I always say that there is good and bad. There is some good in every negative situation. There is some positive.
There's bad and good too. Again, the universe must maintain balance. It is the law of equilibrium.
Yep, and not to say that I am in any way condoning what happened with like concentration camps.
No.
But we learned a lot from that. A lot of stuff that helped millions of people later on. You know, probably more than that. That helped people later on because of those diabolical, horrible experiments that the Nazis did upon the Jews and others in concentration camps.
But if we could go back in time and control these sorts of things, even though there may have been good that came out of it, I would vote that it should never have occurred in the first place.
And it kind of makes you wonder, how far behind would we be if those things hadn't have occurred?
How forward would we be if
those
Rome
things
had
hadn't
not
occurred?
fallen?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's an interesting conundrum, and it's tragic to think about whether you agree with it or not, and I don't agree with what happened. But the science is there. Yeah. And science is what's that? What do you say it is? Science is indisputable?
It's fact. I mean, it is indisputable unless it can be disputed with more science.
Yeah. So. There's no emotion in science.
Science is.
Yep, science is. There's just like with medicine. Medicine is science. There's no emotion in it. Just like the brain itself. You know, their LSD, for instance, helping out with schizophrenia. There are cases, thousands of cases they microdose people on where they're able to act in normal society again because of microdosing with LSD. That is science. The emotion, yes, the emotion, exactly. The emotional aspect of it is the ethical part. Oh, is this it? But you're doing no harm, y'all. You're doing no harm.
Yeah, if it works for one person, that one person should be allowed to have it because it works for them if nothing else in the world does. I mean, hell, cocaine is amazing for stopping nosebleeds.
Yes, you know, it's a great vasoconstrictor, which is why you have heart attacks if you overdose on it. But
sure know about that. You're not personally, but having seen it, you know. So everything is situationally based and it's case by case. And I don't think that we should all be stuck under the same umbrella. I know there are people who benefit significantly from, you know, THC for pain and for nausea. And why are we telling them they can't have it?
Especially when they're going through a man-made drug like chemotherapy, and THC helps them from being nauseated, and they can sleep, and they don't have the muscle aches and the cramps, and
versus Phenergan, which will throw you to sleep all day, or, you know, Zofran, which can, you know, it increases QR intervals, I think, in some dosages. Yeah, I mean,
it increases QT intervals.
QT intervals. QR. What am I? QR codes. I've been in textiles too long, y'all.
Yep. There's a lot of negative side effects to those things, but
so back to the story. Yeah, Ford.
Yeah. So, let me find where I was in the script. Okay. So these files were now all destroyed. So the committee that put the CIA on trial had to rely mainly on sworn testimonies of the direct participants and a few surviving documents.
So you're saying that the people that went on trial against MK Ultra were the ones that had their brains fried.
Yep. And the agents that were actually not terrified of being another Frank Olson.
Right.
Yeah. In 1974, New York Times journalist Seymour Hersh wrote an article about the illegal activities and doings inside the CIA. Then in 1975, the Church Committee came into existence.
Okay.
It was led by Idaho Democratic Senator Frank Church, hence the name. It was an investigation into the abuse of the CIA, FBI, and other U.S. intelligence agencies during and after the resignation of President Nixon. Again, we must piss on the fire hydrant.
Right.
At first, it delved into the assassination plots, and then that led them to discover MK Ultra.
Can you imagine sitting there? I can see it playing out in my head, and you're in one set of files, and you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. They tried to kill him, they tried to shoot him. They are dosing 5-year-old children with LSD to see if they can control their minds. What?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And that's probably kind of what happened. People were just goofing around and trying to figure out doing their job, and then all of a sudden, bam, MK Ultra.
Wow.
These revelations led to President Ford's 1976 executive order on intelligence activities. That it prohibited, quote, experimentation with drugs on human subjects except with the informed consent in writing, witnessed by a disinterested party of the human subject. So if you wanted to go get doped up with LSD by the government, you had to have you had to give them informed consent in writing, which was witnessed by someone who didn't give a F about you.
That's a step in the correct direction.
Yep. It's like, if I want to get doped up by LSD by the CIA, I couldn't have you, witness my writing about it or whatever.
Right.
It had to be someone who didn't care about the CIA or me, one way or the other.
Right.
I was like, yeah, hey, And in 1977, a Freedom of Information Act was requested and uncovered 20,000 more documents relating to MK Ultra.
Oh, wow. Good.
So they had, and you can actually find some of these online. Like, I went through the CIA library database for MK Ultra.
And everything's public now.
Yep, and I found those manuscripts. I found a lot. I didn't, of course, go through 20,000 of them, but I found quite a few that were, I'm surprised they didn't destroy those.
I think that the agency probably got to the point where they're like, you know what? You already know about it. We're really not going to surprise you. For historical purposes or maybe to help someone in the future, we've already done the thing. Why don't we just keep the stuff? Maybe it could be beneficial in the future. We ain't got nothing to hide. Let's carry on and do the next thing.
Yep. And in 2001, everything was declassified.
That makes sense.
And so they discovered more documents, and they'll probably continue to discover more of them because now the CIA is like, yep, we did that. Just like aliens, we came up on the declassification for
UFOs.
Yeah, UFOs, and they released it last year saying, hey, UFOs, aliens exist, and we're like,
Right.
COVID. So we kind of missed the ball on that one.
Exactly. They do things to distract us from other things. The UFO thing came out to distract us from, I'm not getting political, but other things that were going on in the country at the time. I have a question about the declassification of the MK Ultra files in 2001.
Okay.
Was this before or after 9/11?
This was, I believe, before 9/11.
That's what I thought.
I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure. I think it was a little bit before 9/11.
Because I know that, a lot of freedom of information stuff became a huge issue after 9/11, because of Homeland Security and infringing upon our basic human rights and all that. I didn't know if that was something that occurred because of the information flow involved by that, or it happened just organically before 9/11 occurred.
Yeah, that had to be something I'd have to look a little deeper into, but yeah, so MK Ultra.
So that was a good little
blip into how twisted.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm actually going to go look into some of those documents later and see, because I'm curious what has come from it that is in any way positive, besides that whole, maybe microdosing LSD thing might have come from it.
Yeah, I mean, other than to serve how twisted people can be, I'm not.
Yeah, to point out how stupid dudes are sometimes.
To sit, but to watch other humans get drugged up and messed up by prostitutes.
Oh, again, I'm not surprised by anything humans do, but that doesn't surprise me at all, that agents of the CIA would be interested in the debauchery and the pain and suffering or whatever of other people. That's that's what they eat for breakfast. I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah.
Good for them, I guess.
Yep, so that's MK Ultra.
Delicious. I loved it.
Do you want the pearl of wisdom?
I do.
All
Wisdom
right.
me with pearls.
I will Pearl you with the wisdom. Today's Pearl of Wisdom is the old Russian proverb. Proverb. It's late, y'all.
It is.
It's very late. Today's Pearl of Wisdom is the old Russian proverb, trust but verify.
Ooh.
It was taught by an American scholar to Ronald Reagan, and he used it in a few of his speeches, which gained a bad rep. But it means trust that someone is saying, trust what someone is saying or doing, but verify that what they're doing is correct. Yeah, I mean,
this is the best Pearl of Wisdom.
It's tough because it's like, you know, I have trust issues, but I don't have trust issues. I'm an intellectual, and I want to
believe.
I want to believe, and I want to know why I believe it. So when somebody tells me something, I'm like, absolutely, and I may go look right then, or I may ask somebody else, you know, if this is what it is, because I will find the source. Drives my boyfriend nuts. Because I trust him, but when he says something that interests me, you know, about a car accident or whatever, I will go look it up, and maybe sometimes right there, you know, so I can contribute to the conversation, but I also believe it, like really believe it on a scientific level.
I'm a huge skeptic.
Yeah, and that's, you know, a lot of times we take things at face value when we should look further into it. So even with people you trust, you should follow your gut and research, and don't just assume. And just because you feel this way doesn't mean you're accusing someone of, you know, not being trustworthy.
Honest, right?
Yeah.
They may not have all their facts straight, but they've got the basic idea correct. The thing is, this matters so much because social media has distorted that line between, you know, fact and fiction so much so that people will believe a meme and not a peer-reviewed research article, or somebody like me who is learned in particular areas and does research for a living. They'd rather trust something they see on Facebook before they'd trust my opinion. And I'll tell you where I got my sources from.
Oh, constantly. I'll read a meme or something somebody's gone on about, and I'll go look it up, and I'm like, look, this ain't right.
Oh, yeah, y'all all got Google at your fingertips. Use it.
Yeah, and scroll through those resources and find the one that's the common denominator.
Exactly. You're going to find, let's say you type something in, there are going to be 10 pages. If 6 of them say one thing, and 3 of them say something similar but not exactly, and 1 says what you read, odds are the other 9 know somewhere in the truth.
Yeah. There's one that pops in my head when I think about this is, you know, the dress that they sank into the deep sea that turned into salt?
Yes.
Okay. There was a meme out there a couple of years ago that said that this is what happens when bodies go into the Dead Sea. All of your clothes will remain. And there were people who believed it. I'm like, no, y'all, hang on a second. No. And I looked it up, and this dress,
polarity.
This dress it's a piece of art that this person sank down into the Dead Sea. It's crap like that, and trust but verify is different than like take something with a grain of salt.
Right.
So basically, double check your resources, especially procedures and things that involve you, your finances, or your family and friends.
And don't be rude about it.
Yep. Trust but verify.
Wonderful. It was a great podcast.
I enjoyed that one. All right. And that's it.
Great. Today's episode was written by Raven Hutto. Sound editing and mixing by Raven Hutto. Our theme song was composed by Steve Brenley. Today's sources can be found on our Facebook and Instagram at Twins Discuss Podcast and Twitter at Twins Discuss. The Twins will be back in 2 weeks with an all-new episode.